Welcome to Rise and Realign, Conversations for the Sensitive Soul. I'm Melissa, and this space is for those of us who feel deeply, love fiercely, and sense the world in ways that are hard to explain but impossible to ignore. Here, we honor your sensitivity as a strength, not something to fix. This is something that I feel is very essential, right? Like we've all lived a life that has had turmoil and triumph, things to mourn and things to celebrate. And I really sense that my fascination with how the mind operates, you know, starting a mental health career at the age of 19, has just really, it just keeps calling me back to the importance of us understanding how our mind is influencing the journey that we do walk, the one that we live. And what I really love, it was probably, I don't know, some 15, 16 years ago, when I started to study neuroscience, and quantum physics at the same time. And it was just so wonderful, right? To learn about how we have neuroplasticity, right? That um, the brain is malleable and just learning so much about how the brain, operates. But again, just the mind and the brain are often seen synonymous, and that's actually something that I've explored extensively, just because, again, of my own fascination with the mind. And, I think I've referenced, in previous podcasts that I wrote a 9-part highly sensitive series because, again, one of the other things that I've been really called to deepen my understanding and relationship with is what it means to be a highly sensitive individual, right? Like, and again, Dr. Elaine Aron's research on sensory processing sensitivity and how there's a minority of us who are born with this innate survival strategy that is normal yet invisible, right? And you've heard me talk about it as a sensory intelligence, but it's certainly one that we need to understand and come into right relationship with. So, the part 2 of the highly sensitive series is called Unraveling Old Beliefs. And this is really where I feel my biggest contribution has been. It's been in raising awareness about this high sensitivity trait because, again, we just have unique ways of processing, and unique ways of seeing the world and why others do what they do or don't do that influences our experience, right? And so to have the opportunity to reframe our past experiences from a new lens of, oh, I have this high sensitivity trait, but yet when I was growing up, this wasn't researched, it wasn't revealed. And although we can look at ancient history and see that, sensitive individuals were seen as priestly advisors and were certainly those who contributed greatly to our development, right? I mean, there's certainly well-known artists and um, scientists, right, who very clearly are highly sensitive individuals. And of course, Carl Jung is one of, a very significant contributor to the field of psychology. And so the reason that, this is coming up to share is because when we don't understand how our life is unfolding, and granted, it is a complete mystery, but there's a lot that we can delve into to understand, which has been my journey, right? Like, I really want to understand this. I really want to know that what I'm doing for myself is for my highest and greatest good and is aligned with what feels most true and alive and authentic for me. And I want to support others in that as well. So when we look at, how our beliefs formed, right? Like these beliefs are passed down, right? Ancestral lineage wise. We know that the mother line, right? The mitochondrial DNA comes from our maternal line. There's that piece, right? And there's also that roughly 9-month window of time where we're immersed in our mother's womb, our mother's consciousness, her experiences. So, what she's thinking, what she's feeling, and what her nervous system, right? What those patterns are. So, we inherit these before, we're even born into the world. And so, those are like our starting points. Now, some of that can be really beautiful and strengthening, right? Resilience. And some of that is also things that are unresolved, right? And beliefs that can interfere in our own path to live the life that we're here to live, that we prefer, right? But when we live life and do not understand that there are beliefs under the surface, right? And when we are experiencing life and find ourselves in reactionary modes, right? Without question, then life doesn't feel quite as fun. It doesn't feel quite so freeing, right? We don't feel so connected to who we really are. But when we're so conditioned to living life that way, we don't necessarily question whether it can be different. And so I've certainly lived a life where this has been, expanded for me to understand. I absolutely, lived an experience where those old beliefs, that old conditioning went silent and the field of possibilities opened up, right? And this aliveness within my body opened up. And my health shifted, so much shifted, it was just a new level of consciousness that I previously had not lived from. But what, you know, I then experienced was a resurgence of those old beliefs and how I needed to walk that path to understand how these old beliefs, are under the surface and how they show up in our lives, you know, but we need to wake up, right? Like we need to create the space to recognize what are these beliefs that are operating under the surface. Now, again, I speak to highly sensitive women specifically because this is the path I've walked and I've experienced, my own grieving, right? My own losses, my own health challenges. I've felt unsupported by conventional medicine and, just not understood. And so the opportunity to create some space where you can recognize that beliefs are under the surface and they will continue to show up until we sit with them, we explore them. And there's many different ways that we can do that. Um, I certainly have always been a proponent of, breath. You know, Many people don't realize, and I'm telling you, throughout my career, I've worked with, you know, health professionals. We're talking chiropractors, we're talking acupuncturists. Um, you know, it doesn't matter what profession they're in. Medical doctors too, actually, now that I think back to some of my other clients. And it's amazing how after I talk about breath, how I talk about the importance of nasal breathing, right? And really slowing the pace down, that they'll come back and say, wow, I had no idea how often I hold my breath. Wow, I had no idea how shallow my breathing is. And that's where I introduce different types of breath practices to create more space. But if you see from this example, right, like it doesn't matter what we're living as far as whether we're, in a professional role or whether we're, doing the amazing work of being a mother, right? Where that's your full-time commitment, which is beautiful and goes so incredibly unrecognized. Um, but there's so many beliefs around these different things, right? Around um, how we need to push through, or how we need to keep striving, we need to keep performing, right? And so I actually got certified in heart centered clinical hypnotherapy a few years ago, and explored other ways, that we can access old beliefs. But what I found is, for highly sensitive women, that wasn't always, the safest approach. Even when I set anchoring sessions in place to help the nervous system and help them feel safe, like there are certain approaches that are just counterintuitive for somebody who has a more finely tuned central nervous system, like those who have this high sensitivity trait. And so we always want to approach exploring, old beliefs in a way that feels safe and supportive, because we're not going to access, those deeper layers if we're still hypervigilant and not feeling safe, right? So we always need to be tuning in and trusting our own intuition, but many don't. And when I say many don't, I mean, not only do they not tune inward, right? They don't trust. And again, that's just this old operating system that hasn't had the space to breathe, right? And to realign. And so, I mean, this is really why I'm doing what I do, right? Rise and realign. I have a lunar letter, Rise and Realign, Conversations for the Sensitive Soul podcast, right? I have the Realigned Journey. It's all about raising awareness, right? I mean, that's what Rise is. I mean, there's multi aspects to what I mean when I use the word rise, but it's about raising awareness so that we can rise up out of old conditioning. It's a way to rise up in the morning in a way that honors, you and your unique path. Because we are all completely unique, right? Our journeys are so complex and there's so many variables. But, you know, your beliefs shape your reality, and the power to change them lies within you, not anyone else. It's all you, and this is where, Rise is about, coming into right relationship with you, what matters to you, and recognizing what limiting beliefs are operating under the surface. Because you can absolutely release old patterns and step into a life of self-compassion, strength, and empowerment. And it all starts with you. And this seems like a great moment to let's just pause, you know? Let's take a nice slow inhale through the nose. Breathe in deep and strengthen that spine to be tall. And then exhale out your mouth, nice, long, and slow. Just release tension. Relax. Let everything go. And I invite you to continue, just a nice, slow inhale through your nose. Inhale, I'm here. Exhale, I relax. Inhale, I'm here. Exhale, and just continue to relax and let go and allow yourself to be in this moment. What I have found through my own personal journey and the work I do with sensitive women is, unraveling old beliefs is not like, a one time, let's explore this. Oh, there it is, Um, we come in oftentimes with some deep, subconscious beliefs, and we don't necessarily access that in one sitting, right? One session. Um, but what the realign is about is as we become more aware, right? As we rise above old conditions, old patterns, as we rise up out of that, um, I guess, victim consciousness, where we feel like we don't have control, right? Like we're just stuck in these patterns. But as we slow the pace, as we come into the moment, as we breathe, as we connect more with our breath, right? I always say, take a break and breathe love, because that's what's at the core of you. There's just old beliefs that are causing interference. And, when we continue to realign with ourself, with our heart, right? What feels true and correct for us, that's when it becomes easier to recognize when an old belief or an old pattern is surfacing, right? But like I was saying earlier, when, you know, one of my clients would say, like, wow, I didn't know how often I was holding my breath. I didn't realize what a shallow breather I was. Like, think about how many years, right? For some decades, That's been happening. So not only are old beliefs running the show for us, when we don't have that awareness, the body is in direct connection and communication with the mind. So we have to understand there is this relationship between the mind and the body that's inseparable. And so it's worth it, you know? You're worth it to create more space, to breathe, to slow down, to wake up, right? To these patterns that may be running the show more than you realize and causing interference in the sense of you feel more disconnected, right? You're not feeling that flow of love and light that's within you. So I mentioned the Realign journey as one of my offerings. It's an 18-week. It's a very intimate and immersive journey, and when I say intimate, it's because as highly sensitive women, right? Like our nervous system's ability to feel safe, to relax is essential. And so when I offer this group, um, it's very small in numbers. Um, 6 women maximum per group is what feels most supportive, um, so that women can again feel safe to share what they feel ready to share. Um, but creating the space for yourself, right? To rise and realign with you. That's what, my offering is about. And so I do have a free live gathering, um, a moment to pause, a space to inquire that I invite you to consider joining me. It's February 5th at 5 p.m. Pacific time, and you can find the link to register in the show notes. I also, share this on LinkedIn. Um, there's many ways to connect with me. Um, if you're ready to rise out of old conditioning and return to your own rhythm, continue to listen here. You can join the Rise and Realign Lunar Letter. And like I said, everything will be in the show notes, but also realignwithmelissa.com. And, but yeah, as a reminder, we're here together to rise, reclaim, remember. Where the heart leads, the body remembers, and the soul awakens. So I've walked this path as a sensitive woman, as a solopreneur, as a solo parent. Um, and my heart just continues to guide me to share this information so that sensitive women can reclaim their voice, their health, their rhythm. Because this modern world is so noisy, so busy, so overstimulating. We need a space to come together where we can breathe together, where we can relax, where we can soften, when we can start to understand how uniquely we're designed and really nurture our relationship with ourself and our sensory intelligence, because it's incredible. So before we close, I invite you to return to your breath, to your body, to what feels true for you right now. There's nothing you need to fix. Just notice what's here. And then choose you. Keep choosing you and what you need. What is for your highest and greatest good. So take good care of you. Much love and light.